Hi guys, in this video we are going to do a rigorous reading of chapter 5th of Vipin Chandra, that is the structure of government and economic policies of the British Empire in India during 1757 to 1857. So I'll just read it, I'll not explain, and because we have this like kind of audio book lesson. Okay, so without any further delay, let's start. Having acquired the vast empire of India, the East India Company had to devise suitable methods of government to control and administer it. The administrative policy of the company underwent frequent changes during the long period between 1757 and 1857. However, it never lost sight of its main objects, which were to increase the company's profits, to enhance the profitability of its Indian possessions to Britain, and to maintain and strengthen the British hold over India. All other purposes were subordinated to these aims. The administrative machinery of the Government of India was designed and developed to serve these ends. The main emphasis in this aspect was placed on the maintenance of law and order so that the trade with India and exploitation of its resources could be carried out without disturbance. I repeat, the administrative machinery of the Government of India was designed and developed to serve these ends. The main emphasis in this respect was placed on the maintenance of law and order so that trade with India and exploitation of its resource could be carried out without disturbance. The structure of government. The structure of government. When the officials of East India Company acquired control over Bengal in 1765, they had little intention of making any innovations in its administration. They only desired to carry on their profitable trade and to collect taxes for remission to England. From 1765 to 1772, in the period of dual government, Indian officials were allowed to function as before, but under the overall control of the British governor and British officials. The Indian officials had responsibility but no power, while the company's officials had power but no responsibility. Both sets of officials were venal and corrupt men. In 1772, the company ended the dual government and undertook to administer Bengal directly through its own servants. If you remember, in 1772, Warren Hastings had become the governor of Bengal. But the evils inherent in the administration of a country by a purely commercial company soon came to the surface. The East India Company was at its best was at this time a commercial body designed to trade with the East. Moreover, its higher authority was situated in England, many thousands of miles away from India. Yet, it had come to wield political power over millions of people. The anomalous state of affairs posed many problems for the British government. What was to be the relation of the East India Company and its possessions to the government in Britain? How were the company's authorities in Britain to control the great multitude of officials and soldiers stationed in faraway India? How was a single center of control to be provided in India over the far-flung British possessions in Bengal, Madras, and Bombay? The first of these problems was the most pressing as well as the most important. The first problem was what? The first problem was what was to be the relation of East India Company and its possessions to the government in Britain. It was moreover closely interwoven with party and parliamentary rivalries in Britain. The political ambitions of English statesmen and the commercial greed of English merchants, the rich resources of Bengal had fallen into the hands of the company, whose proprietors immediately raised in dividends to 10% in 1767 and proposed in 1771 to raise it further to 121%. I repeat, The rich resources of Bengal had fallen into hands of company whose proprietors immediately raised dividends to 10% in 1767 and proposed in 1771 to raise the rate further to 121%. So who are the people who are going to be the victims while these dividends are going to increase? Obviously, the Indian population. The company's English servants took advantage of their position to make quick fortunes through illegal and unequal trade and forcible collection of bribes and gifts from Indian chiefs and jamidars. Clive returned to England at the age of 34 with the wealth and property yielding around 40,000 euros a year. Can you imagine 40,000 euros at that time was a big amount. The company's high dividends and the fabulous wealth brought home by its official excited the jealousy of other sections of the British society. Merchants kept out of the East by the monopoly of the company. The growing class of manufacturers and in general the rising forces of free enterprise in Britain wanted to share in the profitable Indian trade and the riches of India which the company and its servants alone were enjoying. They therefore worked hard to destroy the company's trade monopoly, and in order to achieve this, they attacked the company's administration of Bengal. They also made the officials of the company who returned from India their special target. Who made the officials of the company who returned back to Britain? They were the merchants who didn't had the right to trade in India because the East India Company was enjoying monopoly over here. Okay, these officials were given the decisive title of Naboobs just to insult them and were ridiculed in the press and on the stage. They were boycotted by the aristocracy and were condemned as the exploitators and oppressors of the Indian people. It's not like that they were very much keen on the status of Indian peasants and public. They were only jealous of that East India Company officials. Their two main targets were Clive and Warren Hastings. By condemning the Nawabs, the opponents of company, condemning the Naboobs, they were called Naboobs back home in Britain. Who? Warren Hastings and Clive. By condemning the Naboobs, the opponents of the company hoped to make the company unpopular and then to displace it. So what was the motto behind criticizing them? The motto was to capture the market over here by them who were not getting a chance to trade over here, because the trade over here was the most beneficial for any trade outside India, or you can say the European traders. Many ministers and other members of parliament were keen to benefit from acquisition of Bengal. They sought to win popular support by forcing the company to pay tribute to British government so that Indian revenue could be used to reduce taxation or the public debt of the England. In 1767, the parliament passed an act obliging the company to pay to the British Treasury 400,000 euros per year. Can you imagine this much amount, a big amount? In the Parliament 1767, this act was passed to force the company to pay this much amount per annum. Many political thinkers and statesmen of Britain wanted to control the activities of the company and its officials because they were afraid that the powerful company and its rich officials would completely debauch the English nation and its politics. I repeat, many political thinkers and statesmen of Britain wanted to control the activities of the company and its officials because they were afraid that the powerful company and its rich officials would completely debauch the English nation and its politics. The parliamentary politics of Britain during the latter half of the 18th century were corrupt in the extreme. The company, as well as its retired officials, bought seats in the House of Commons for their agents. So you can see the East India Company was getting influential in the House of Commons as well. because they were very rich. They could afford to buy a seat. The seats over there could be bought as well. The corrupted parliamentary system, kind of. Many English statesmen were worried that the company and its officials, backed by Indian plunder, might gain a preponderant influence in the government of Britain. A legitimate concern of their, English statesmen who were of the opinion that if the company was allowed to plunder more and more in this Indian colony, they will get richer and they will capture the power and politics back home as well. So that was the concern of the local intelligentsia or English statesmanship. The company and its vast empire in India had to be controlled, or the company as master of India would soon come to control British administration and be in a position to destroy the liberties of the British people. That was the concern of the intelligentsia or social thinkers. The exclusive privileges of the company were also attacked by the rising school of economists representing free trade, manufacturing, capitalism. In his celebrated work, The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith. So here comes one kind of question. Who wrote The Wealth of Nations? Wealth of Nations was written by Adam Smith. Adam Smith was a supporter of free trade, and he said that the such exclusive companies therefore are nuisances in many respects, always more or less inconvenient to the countries in which they are established and destructive to those which have the misfortune to fall under their government. I repeat, in his celebrated work, The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith, the founder of classical economics, condemned the exclusive companies. He said, such exclusive companies therefore are nuisances in many respects, always more or less inconvenient to the countries in which they are established and destructive to those which have the misfortune to fall under their government. Thus, reorganization of the relations between the British state and the company's authorities became necessary, and the occasion arose when the company had to ask the government for a loan of rupees 1 lakh euros. But while the company's enemies were many and powerful, it was not without the powerful friends in Parliament. Moreover, the King George III was its patron. The company therefore fought back. In the end, Parliament worked out a compromise by which the interests of the company and of the various influential sections of the British society were delicately balanced. It was decided that the British government would control the basic policies of the company's Indian administration, so that the British rule in India was carried on in the interest of the British upper class as a whole. So here comes the British government that takes the part of miniature policy making in Indian administration by the company. So at the same time, the company would retain its monopoly of Eastern trade and the valuable right of appointing its officials in India. The details of the Indian administration were also left to the directors of the company. So the monopoly of Eastern trade and the valuable right of appointing its officials was still there with the company only. So the company was still the de facto ruler in the Indian colonies. The details of the Indian administration were also left to the directors of the company, and directors of the company were the ones who are going to decide the policy majoritarianly, you can say that. The first important parliamentary act regarding the company's affairs was the Regulating Act of 1773. So here you can say, here comes the Regulating Act of 1773, a very important act regarding British governance and administration. So this act, what this act did was, this act made changes in the constitution of the court of directors of the company and subjected their actions to the supervision of the British government. So what was happening, that the actions of the directors, the court of directors of the company, if you remember, the court of directors was 24 in number. They used to manage the policy of the company. So their policy will be kind of under the speculation and supervision of the British government. The directors were to lay before the ministry all correspondence dealing with the civil and military affairs and the revenues of India. So three main parts are coming in the regarding the policies of made by the directors: civil policies, military, and revenues. These three things they are going to report to the government back home in Britain. So they were to lay the reports regarding civil, military and revenues of the India before the ministry of British. ठीक है? In India, the government of Bengal was to be carried on by a governor general and his council, who were given the power to superintend and to control the Bombay and the Madras presidencies in the matters of war and peace. So here comes the Bengal was given kind of extraordinary powers where it comes to regulating the affairs, and Bombay and Madras were made subordinate to Bengal somehow. The Act also provided for the establishment of a Supreme Court of Justice at Calcutta to administer justice to Europeans, their employees, and the citizens of the Calcutta. The Regulating Act soon broke down in practice. It had not given the British government effective and decisive control over the company. So it was not quite successful as a matter of policy when it comes to the Regulating Act of 1773. That is why Regulating Act of 1773 was abolished later on, and some new acts were came to the picture. So we will see those acts as well in this chapter. So Regulating Act K provisions, we saw that. Okay, so now in India it had placed the Governor General at the mercy of his council. So what were the drawbacks of Regulating Act of 1773? It was that the Governor General was at the mercy of his council. Means Governor General was not that powerful that he was supposed to be to monitor all those affairs that were going on in the colonies that were under the subjugation of British. So he was just kind of nominal Governor General. So council was having the original powers. So three of the councillors could combine and outvote the Governor General on any matter. So what was happening in that in 1773, Governor General had no veto. Okay, so Governor General could be outnumbered by a majority vote by the council. In practice, Warren Hastings, the first Governor General under the Act, and three of his councillors quarrelled incessantly, often creating deadlocks in the administration. Means उनकी सहमति नहीं बन पाती थी चीजों पे. The Governor General's control over the other two presidencies also proved an inadequate in practice. There was the provision of the subordinates of Madras and Bombay, but Madras and Bombay practically didn't obey the orders from Bengal presidency coming into their fore. Okay, so they were still having wars, they were still having treaties amongst themselves and the Indian rulers. So they were not actually obeying the orders from Bengal presidency. Most important of all, the act had failed to resolve the conflict between the company and its opponents in England, who were daily growing stronger and more vocal. So company or opponents जो थे उसके इंग्लैंड में वापस back home, they were not getting resolved anyhow, no matter what the British government was willing to do. But there was still the monopoly of trade in the India of East India Company. So they were not anyhow going to be resolved unless until more companies are going to come in or crawl in, creep in. Okay, so the act had failed to resolve the conflict between the company and its opponents in England, who were daily growing stronger and more vocal. And the most important reason that this act brought into the picture was that to resolve the conflicts between the company and its opponents back home in the Britain. So it was not doing its due and it was defeating the purpose itself. Okay, moreover, the company remained extreme vulnerable to the attacks of its enemies, as the administration of the Indian possessions continued to be corrupt, oppressive and economically disastrous. The company remained extremely vulnerable to the attacks of the enemies, as the administration of its Indian possessions continued to be corrupt and oppressive and economically disastrous. So new enemies were getting born, and as well as the administration inside by the company itself was kind of corrupt, oppressive. Okay, and the local population was still suffering. The defects of the Regulating Act and the exigencies of British politics necessitated the passing of 1784 of another important act known as the Pitt's India Act. This act gave the British government supreme control over the company's affairs and its administration in India. It established six commissioners for the affairs of India. So, six commissioners were appointed for the affairs of India, popularly known as the Board of Control. So, अभी तक क्या था 1773 में Court of Directors था. There were 24 Court of Directors. Now, one more body was made. It was known as Board of Control, and there were 6 members in Board of Control. और उन 6 members में से 2 आपके थे Cabinet Minister. The Board of Control was to guide and control the work of the Court of Directors and the government of India. So what was the Board of Control was supposed to do? It was to control the work of the Court of Directors and the government of India. In important and urgent matter, it had the power to send direct orders to India through a secret committee of directors. So basically, Board of Control was kind of going to control the affairs of the company and was kind of more powerful than the Court of Directors. Though these two bodies were in existence, nobody was defying or in conflict with each other's existence, but a body called Board of Control was created, and it could send an order to the company by a secret committee of directors as well. The act placed the government of India in the hands of the Governor General and a council of 3. And then here the act just gave some power to the Governor General and Council of 3, so that the Governor General could get the support of even one member, he could have his way. So पहले 4 members होते थे Governor General की council में, if you could recall. यहाँ पे नहीं लिखा था, still I'm going to tell you that 1773 के टाइम पे गवर्नर जनरल के काउंसिल में 4 मेंबर थे, ठीक है. If I'm wrong, then do correct me, because maybe I could be wrong. Okay, so do check it once. Okay, so there was like majoritarian vote could outnumber governor general's vote, sorry, governor's vote. उसको भी governor बोल रहे, governor general वो बाद में बनेगा. ओके, सो बेसिकली वो बन चुका है, 1772 में ही बन गया था गवर्नर, राइट, बंगाल का था, लेकिन उसको बाद में गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया बाद में वॉरेन हेस्टिंग्स के टाइम पे बनाएंगे अभी, ठीक है. तो इस एक्ट में क्या हुआ, 3 ही काउंसिल के मेंबर्स रखे गए, ताकि अगर असहमति हो, अगर एक भी बंदा साथ दे दे तो गवर्नर जनरल की ही बात मानी जाए, सो दैट इफ द गवर्नर जनरल कुड गेट द सपोर्ट ऑफ इवन वन मेंबर, ही कुड हैव हिज वे. द एक्ट क्लियरली सबऑर्डिनेट द बॉम्बे एंड मद्रास प्रेसिडेंसी टू बंगाल इन ऑल क्वेश्चंस ऑफ वॉर, डिप्लोमेसी एंड रेवेन्यूज. With this act began a new phase of the British conquest of India. While the East India Company became an instrument of British national policy, India was to be made to serve the interest of all sections of the ruling class of Britain. The company, having saved its monopoly of the Indian and Chinese trade, was satisfied. Its directors retained the profitable right of appointing and dismissing its British officials in India. So, though Board of Control was going to direct some or more affairs of the company, the directors, or you can say the Court of Directors, still had a majority say in appointing of British officials in India, and as well as the civil servants and everything was under the hands of Court of Directors. So the government of India was to be carried out through their own agency. Okay, so while Pitt's India Act laid down the general framework in which the government of India was to be carried out until 1857, later enactments brought about several important changes in which gradually diminished the powers and privileges of the company. So it was a mota-moti framework for the company's governance till 1857, but still with time more and more changes keep on creeping in. In 1786, the Governor General was given the authority to overrule his council in matters of importance affecting safety, peace, or the interests of the empire in India. So here the Governor General's power was increased. In 1786, he was given more powers in the matters of safety, peace, interest of the empire in India. By the Charter Act of 1813, and now after 1773 came the Pitt's India Act of 1784. After Pitt's India Act of 1784 came the Charter Act of 1813. What happened in Charter Act of 1813? The trade monopoly of the company in India was ended, and trade with China was thrown open to all British subjects. So what was happening is that The trade monopoly of the company in India was ended. चाय और चाइना बस दो चीजें रह गई थी कंपनी के पास 1813 में से. Trade monopoly was ended. Okay, but trade in tea and trade with China were still exclusive to the company. The government and the revenues of India continued to be in the hands of the company. अभी भी उसको पॉलिटिकल पावर्स जो थी रेवेन्यू वसूलने की और एक तरह से राजा बन के रहने की इंडिया में, वो अभी भी कंपनी के पास ही थी. मोटा मोटी क्या हुआ था कि बाकी और कंपनीज भी आके बिजनेस कर सकती हैं, लेकिन जो चाय में ट्रेड है और चाइना के साथ जो ट्रेड है वो जो है आपका कंपनी के हाथ में ही रहेगा. The company also continued to appoint its officials in India. अभी भी जो उसके officials को appoint करने की ताकत थी वो कंपनी के पास खुद थी. The Charter Act of 1833 The Charter Act of 1833 brought the company's monopoly of tea trade with trade in China to an end. तो अभी हमने देखा कि 1813 में कंपनी को मोनोपोली तो चली गई, लेकिन चाय और चाइना जो था वो बेसिकली कंपनी के हाथ में था अभी भी, और बाकी सारी पावर्स भी अभी भी ज्यों की त्यों कंपनी के हाथ में बनी थी. लेकिन चार्टर एक्ट ऑफ 1833 में जो चाय और चाइना का प्रिविलेज भी मिला था कंपनी को वो भी खत्म कर दिया गया. एट द सेम टाइम द डेब्ट्स ऑफ द कंपनी वर टेकन ओवर बाय द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया विच वॉज टू पे इट्स shareholders a 101% dividend on their capital. So debt of company was taken by the government, okay, and now it is going to pay the shareholders a 101% dividend, or you can say it is 10.5%. Sorry for my mispronunciation. It is 10.5%. shareholders को 10.5% डिविडेंड मिलना था उनके कैपिटल पे, मतलब वो जो इतना इन्वेस्ट करते थे उनका 10.5% जो है उनको मिलना था, और मतलब इंटरेस्ट मिलना था. द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया कंटिन्यूड टू बी रन बाय द कंपनी अंडर द स्ट्रिक्ट कंट्रोल ऑफ बोर्ड ऑफ कंट्रोल. सो बोर्ड ऑफ कंट्रोल वाज काइंड ऑफ controlling in a de facto manner the affairs of the company. The court of directors still had the power to appoint officials and do all those things. पॉलिटिकल कंट्रोल तो उसको प्योरली एक तरह से आप कह सकते हैं 1833 में उसको प्योरली एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव बॉडी बना दिया, और उसके कमर्शियल राइट्स जो थे वो ले लिए गए गवर्नमेंट ऑफ ब्रिटेन द्वारा. सो द कंपनी came under the strict control of board of control by the charter act of 1833. हालांकि जो आपका बोर्ड ऑफ कंट्रोल था वो आपका 1784 के ही एक्ट से आ गया था. नाउ मूविंग अहेड, दिस द वेरियस एक्ट्स ऑफ पार्लियामेंट डिस्कस्ड अबव कंप्लीटली सबऑर्डिनेटेड द कंपनी एंड इट्स इंडियन एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन टू द ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट. एट द सेम टाइम इट वाज रिकॉग्नाइज्ड दैट डे टू डे एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन ऑफ इंडिया कुड नॉट बी रन और इवन सुपरिंटेंडेड फ्रॉम अ डिस्टेंस ऑफ 6,000 miles. So it was recognized by somehow the British government that, you know, by sitting here in the Britain I cannot manage Indian affairs. Supreme authority in India was therefore delegated to the Governor General and Council. Now Governor General was given more power. देखा हमने कि 1784 में उसको 3 मेंबर कर दिए गए ताकि वो कुछ पावर एग्जर्ट कर सके और उसकी जो है मेजॉरिटी में से दब ना जाए. The Governor General having the authority to overrule his council. 1784 में हमने देखा कि गवर्नर जनरल के काउंसिल में 3 मेंबर कर दिए गए ताकि वो जो है अगर उससे एक बंदा भी सहमत हो तो उसका डिसीजन पास हो जाए. लेकिन अब 1833 में क्या किया गया, 1833 में बोला गया कि गवर्नर जनरल जो कहेगा वही पत्थर की लकीर है, वही सबको मानना पड़ेगा. काउंसिल को वो मना कर सकता था कि हम तुम्हारा डिसीजन मानते ही नहीं है, ठीक है. ये कब हुआ, ये 1833 में हुआ, ठीक है. द गवर्नर जनरल हैविंग द अथॉरिटी टू ओवररूल हिज काउंसिल इन इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चंस बिकेम in fact the real effective ruler of India, functioning under the superintendence, control and direction of British government. So Governor General was kind of acting as a British regent. It is to be noted that Indians were allowed no share in their own administration. Indians को अब तक कोई हक नहीं था खुद पे राज करने का या खुद के जो है आपकी एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन को संभालने का. The 3 seats of authority as far as India was concerned were the court of directors of the company, the board of the control and the British government and the Governor General. So you can say the main players who were having real powers were court of directors who were 24 in number, the board of control 6 in number, उसमें से 2 कैबिनेट मिनिस्टर थे और गवर्नर जनरल. सो बेसिकली ये 3 ग्रुप था या तीन आपको कह सकते हैं कि ये एक झुंड था जिनके पास रियल पावर्स थी, और अभी इंडियंस कोई भी हिस्सा नहीं ले रहे थे एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में. With none of the three was any Indian associated even remotely or in any capacity. Can you imagine in 1833 till 1833 there was no Indian in Indian administration itself? What a shock. The British created a new system of administration in India to serve their purpose. But before we discuss the salient features of this system, it would be better if we first examine the purpose which it was designed to serve. For the main function of the administrative system of a country is to accomplish the aims and objectives of its ruler. अब ब्रिटिश ने अपना एक नया फ्रेमवर्क तैयार किया था, बट we have to understand that it was for their own benefit, not the benefit of the local population. The chief aim was the British was to enable them to exploit India economically and to maximum advantage of various British interests, ranging from the company to the Lancashire manufacturers. At the same time, India was to be made to bear the full cost of its own conquest as well as the foreign rule. मतलब जितनी भी लड़ाइयाँ करते थे ये जो एंग्लो मैसूर वॉर या 7 years वॉर जो यूरोप में चल रही थी, उन सबको फाइनेंस करने का एक तरीका उन्होंने निकाल रखा था, सोने की चिड़िया भारत, जिसपे वो कब्जा करके बैठे थे और वहां के लोगों से लंबा मोटा पैसा वसूल करते थे इन फॉर्म ऑफ रेवेन्यूज, और उसी से वो अपनी लड़ाइयाँ भी फाइनेंस करते थे, अपने जो पैशन थे उनको पूरा कर रहे थे. एन एग्जामिनेशन ऑफ द इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज ऑफ द ब्रिटिश इन इंडिया इज देयरफॉर ऑफ प्राइम इम्पोर्टेंस. तो अब ये वीडियोस हो गई सारे एक्ट्स की और जो स्टार्टिंग का इंट्रो था. अब हम आगे आने वाली वीडियो में ब्रिटिश इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज इन इंडिया इन 1757 टू 1857 की बात करेंगे. टिल देन आपको ये वीडियो कैसा लगा मुझे बताइए, और आपको लगता है कि ऐसे ई बुक्स की ऑडियो लेसन्स अगर कवर की जाएं तो वो भी मुझे ज़रूर बताइएगा. थैंक यू सो मच फॉर वॉचिंग. कीप सपोर्टिंग, कीप वॉचिंग. थैंक यू.